because we're mostly seniors and retirees here, and that's our organization for retired Americans, but we're concerned about our children and grandchildren. Now, do you know that there are 1,000 baby boomers retiring or reaching 65 every day? That's a lot of people. Now, what is their condition? Did you know that in the 2008 recession, 25% of people with 401ks took money out of them? And that the average person retiring now in 2010, 2011, last data, had $30,000 was the amount that they had for retirement. That's their own private funds, etc., 401ks, etc. Without Social Security, where will they be? Well, we've got to get that message.
CPI is like this zombie idea. It just keeps coming back, so it's worth talking about a bit. One of the most unfortunate things about this chain CPI is that it was in the president's budget. He actually put it in there as an idea. So Democrats and Republicans have supported it, and that makes it really dangerous because anything that's bipartisan in Washington has a better chance of passing. The chain CPI, I don't want to bore you, but basically the way that they want to measure inflation for seniors, because this affects the cost of living adjustment every year, it's basically saying, well, if prices rise for something like chicken and people decide to buy cheese instead, we're going to count the cost of cheese more and forget about the chicken. So basically, as people's living standards go down, they say inflation is going down. And that's how they justify changing to the chain CPI. They're going to say, well, you know, inflation isn't rising so fast, so we're going to make the cost of living adjustments for Social Security smaller every year. It's about 0.3% a year, which is not a lot when you hear that number, but it stacks up every year. And basically, if you retire at 65, by the time you're 75, that would be about $650 a year. By the time you're 85, it would be over $1,000 a year. And so let's say you've been retired for 15 years. Under the chain CPI, you would have lost about $6,000 in today's dollars. Not only does it kind of lock in lower and lower living standards, but it also doesn't reflect the way that seniors actually live. You know, the current inflation measures don't count, health care and housing as much as for seniors. And there are studies, and there's actually another way to measure inflation called the elderly price index, the CPI-E for elderly. They've looked into how elderly people, retirees, actually have to spend money. You can't go to a discount store for your health care, and it's not like you can just buy cheap and you substitute cheese for chicken. You can't really do that with your housing, and seniors spend a lot more money on housing and health care. When you look at the CPI-E, that really looks at seniors, it shows that their inflation has gone up by 0.3% a year, more than the current standards. So people are saying chain CPI, it would drop it by 0.3%. In reality, we need to raise it by at least 0.3% a year. So, some of these bills that have been mentioned actually put in the CPI-E, the elderly price index, and that would be a much better way to go.
Some economists have been looking at what's happening with those 1,000 people, baby boomers, who are continuing to retire every day. And they estimate that 50%, half of middle-class workers will be near poor or poor in retirement. That's because the company-sponsored pension plans and all those things have gone. The 401ks haven't done as well. And what will be there? Social Security. So we're going to need to boost that.
And one of the best, solutions, if we do want to address that 1% of the economy worth of a shortfall that we're going to see 20 years from now, is scrapping the cap. And again, it's already been mentioned, but just to explain it again in a little bit more detail, right now, income up to $113,700 is taxed for Social Security. So if you're making $250,000 a year, this top half of your money isn't being taxed. You're paying half the rate of regular people. If you're making, over $1 million a year, you're paying maybe 1/10 of the rate. And that's just not fair. So scrapping the cap, this payroll tax cap, it's just fairness. It's bringing in a lot more money into Social Security. It could basically take care of the entire shortfall rather than, cutting the benefits for seniors in the future. And yet you hardly ever hear about scrapping the cap inside the Beltway. So we really need folks like you to pressure your congressmen and senators so that, we'll start hearing it.
Work through all the people out there who just look at those television ads and they don't think about what's happening. I'm not sure. What do you do that? Do you do that with your kids and grandkids when they're over watching an ad? I always did it with my children. What's wrong with that? Etc., etc. See this, see that? They become very critical of the message that is sent so simply. Well, we need to continue to do that in our organizations. Counteract that propaganda that's out there and get the real data out there. That there are going to be continuing numbers of people who are going to really need Social Security.
They were saying that there's a trust fund for Social Security. You'll hear in the newspapers that, Social Security is in the red. They say that because they're only counting the money that came in and the benefits paid out. They're not counting the interest on $2.7 trillion in bonds. If you count the interest, and when I pay my taxes, I have to put my interest as my income, so I think we should count it as income. Social Security is in surplus, and it will be for the next 10 years. It's going to go over $3 trillion. So when you hear people say Social Security is in the red, they're not counting the, here back in Washington, all they want to talk about is deficits and debt reduction. Even though deficits have dropped by more than half since President Obama took office, you never hear that in the media. But they keep talking about it. So they keep putting this chain CPI out there. It's especially strange, though, because Social Security has never added a dime to the deficit. By law, Social Security can't spend more than it takes in and its interest payments. Payroll taxes, workers are paying for Social Security. It's your money, and they're trying to take it away. So it's really important to sort of, when people talk about the deficit and debts and they throw Social Security in, it's really important to correct them and say Social Security doesn't add to the deficit. So I don't know why you're talking about it when you're talking about deficits. The two are not in the same pot in terms of looking at the federal budget.
I want to thank Senator Ferlo. This has been wonderful. This all resulted from an email I had from Ed Christar one day saying, would you get on a phone call with us? And this is what developed. We've worked very long and hard on this, and it's been wonderful. The response is great. The weather's bad. We can't go out on the streets, and we can't really protest too hard. But I would encourage people, write editorials. We really have to educate the people. In Pittsburgh, I know people read the editorial page. I see a lot of people I know that have editorials in. We really need to do this to educate.
And what we have to do is let our people and our organizations and get it out to our kids and grandkids. Yeah, Social Security is going to be there. There's some data that 35 or 40% of young people don't think Social Security will be there. Hey, it's got a big surplus right now. And we take off that cap, we have more money coming in. And look at all these people now who have suffered from the Bush recession and other things who don't have a solid retirement. So get out there and get that message out to them. Thank you.